The dust settled over the quiet town of Harmony Creek like a shroud, not from wind, but from neglect. It was the kind of place people drove through on their way to somewhere else, rarely stopping. The highway, once a lifeline, now seemed only to carry the noise and hurry of the world past its sleepy edges. Nestled just off that highway was Eleanor Vance's gas station and general store. It wasn't much, 2 pumps that often needed coaxing, a small cinderblock building with faded paint, and a porch swing that creaked a mournful tune in the infrequent breeze. Eleanor herself seemed to fit the quiet, unassuming landscape. She was an older woman, her hair the color of steel wool pulled back in a simple bun. Her hands, though gnarled with age, were steady as they counted change or wiped down the worn counter. She moved with a quiet efficiency, her routine as predictable as the sunrise. Open before dawn, coffee brewing, dusting shelves stocked mostly with basics and forgotten snacks, closing well after sunset. She offered a quiet nod, a soft, thank you, and sometimes, for the regulars who were left, a brief, kind word. Most strangers barely noticed her, looking past her to the maps or the candy rack, seeing only an elderly woman running a fading business. They saw the faded paint, the slightly uneven floorboards inside, the ancient cash register. They did not see the alertness in her eyes, eyes that missed nothing. They did not see the way her body held itself, not frail, but composed, balanced, ready in a way that spoke of deep, ingrained discipline. Her movements, slow to the casual observer, possessed a latent precision, a controlled economy of motion that hinted at something entirely different beneath the surface. Eleanor Vance lived a life deliberately small, deliberately quiet. She sought peace, a simple rhythm to fill the days and years that remained. The world she had once inhabited was loud, dangerous, and demanding. It had required everything she had, and then some. It had given her skills few civilians would ever need, and it had taken things she could never get back. Harmony Creek, in its forgotten corner of the world, offered a balm to those old wounds. It offered anonymity, the gentle predictability of small-town life, the quiet comfort of being overlooked. For years, it had worked. The scars, both visible and unseen, remained, but they were quiet companions here, not screaming reminders. The days blurred into a comforting pattern, the clatter of the coffee pot, the rumble of the occasional truck, the rustle of old newspapers. Eleanor watched the road, she watched the few people who passed through, and she waited for nothing in particular. She simply existed, a quiet presence in a quiet place. But Harmony Creek was changing. A new kind of dust was being kicked up, not by benign neglect, but by a deliberate, corrosive force. Trouble had arrived not like a storm, but like a slow, creeping vine, winding its way into the town's fabric, choking the life out of it. They called themselves the Vipers. They weren't a big city cartel, not yet, but they had big city aspirations and small-town cruelty. They had started subtly, with graffiti on the old water tower, then escalating to loitering, petty theft. Now, they were bolder. They drove loud cars with souped-up engines, tearing through the quiet streets, their presence a constant, grating noise. They wore matching jackets, cheap leather or denim, marked with a stylized viper symbol, a warning and a brand. Their faces were young, full of false bravado and genuine menace. They weren't locals, they had moved in, pushed out the older, less organized troublemakers, and established their hold with swift, brutal efficiency. Shopkeepers started paying them protection. Houses were broken into, not just for valuables, but seemingly to instill fear. Kids were harassed, their meager allowances shaken down. A pall of fear hung over Harmony Creek, thick and suffocating. The townspeople kept their heads down, their doors locked. The local law enforcement, a small sheriff's office, seemed overwhelmed, understaffed, or perhaps, some whispered, compromised. The peace Eleanor had found here was being threatened. The quiet hum of her routine was being drowned out by the roar of engines and the low thrum of fear. She watched them from behind her counter, observed them as they swaggered through town, their eyes cold and arrogant. She saw the fear in the eyes of her few remaining customers. She saw the way the life was being leached out of Harmony Creek, replaced by a creeping dread. The vipers were like a sickness, and the town was slowly succumbing. Eleanor Vance, who only wanted to be left alone, felt a familiar, unwelcome stir deep within her. A sense of righteous indignation, a feeling that had driven her for decades in a different life, began to awaken from its long slumber. The quiet gas station, the symbol of her peaceful retirement, was about to become a flashpoint. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the air thick and still, promising rain that wouldn't come. 3 cars, loud and beat up, pulled into Eleanor Station, tires squealing unnecessarily on the worn asphalt. They weren't there for gas. 10 young men spilled out, all wearing the Vipers' colors, swaggering with a confidence that bordered on cartoonish. Their leader stepped forward, a young man named Spike. He wasn't big, but he moved with a twitchy energy, his eyes darting everywhere, restless and hungry. He had a cruel smirk painted on his face, a face that had never known hardship or earned anything it had. His followers fanned out, leaning against the pumps, laughing loudly, tossing cigarette butts onto the ground despite the clear signs. Spike walked up to the porch, not bothering to use the steps, just stepping onto the old wooden planks with a heavy boot. Eleanor came out of the store, wiping her hands on a rag. She looked at them, her expression unreadable. "Can I help you boys?" she asked, her voice low and steady, holding no hint of fear. Spike stopped a few feet from her, his smirk widening. He glanced back at his crew, who snickered. "Yeah, Grandma, you can," he said, his voice deliberately condescending. He took a crumpled bag of fast food trash from one of his men and tossed it carelessly towards Eleanor's feet. It landed with a greasy splat on the porch. "Clean that up," he sneered. "And maybe make us some coffee. And you know, we're thinking this is prime real estate here. Maybe you should be paying us for the privilege of having our business." His eyes raked over her, dismissively. "Or maybe you just get out. Old people like you just slow things down." His men laughed again, louder this time. Eleanor didn't flinch. Her gaze remained fixed on Spike, her eyes betraying nothing of the cold calculations rapidly firing in her mind. She took a slow, deliberate breath, the scent of stale grease and cheap cologne momentarily overriding the faint smell of gasoline. She noted the positioning of each man, their weapons, mostly knives and a few poorly concealed handguns, their body language, overconfident, sloppy. She registered Spike's distance, his stance, the angle of the sunlight behind him. She saw the fear in the eyes of a customer who had just pulled up in an ancient pickup truck, now frozen at the pumps. She saw the trash bag at her feet. A flicker, brief as a camera flash, crossed her face, not fear, but something ancient and dangerous. "That's not how we do things here," Eleanor said, her voice still quiet, but with an iron edge that cut through the laughter. Spike's smirk faltered for a second, then snapped back, harder. "Oh yeah? And how do you do things, old woman?" He took a step closer, puffing out his chest. One of his men started to move towards the customer in the truck. That was the trigger. Eleanor moved. It wasn't a sudden, flashy movement. It was fluid, precise, terrifyingly efficient. Her right hand didn't just reach for the broom leaning against the wall, it snaked out, gripping the handle in a way that spoke of practiced, lethal intent. In the same instant, she pivoted slightly, using the broom not to sweep, but as a leverage point. The bristled end swept low and fast, catching Spike just above the ankles. He yelped, stumbling forward, completely off balance. Before he could recover, the handle, held like a staff, whipped around and struck him sharply under the jaw. It wasn't a wild swing, it was a targeted, incapacitating blow. Spike's eyes rolled back, and he crumpled to the porch like a sack of potatoes. The laughter of his men died instantly. They stared, stunned into silence for a fraction of a second. Eleanor didn't pause. The broom handle became a blur. One man lunged forward, she met him with a sharp jab to the sternum that stole his breath and sent him staggering back, doubled over. Another pulled a knife, She deflected his wrist with the handle and delivered a quick, brutal strike to his elbow, causing him to scream and drop the weapon. She wasn't fighting, she was dismantling. Each movement was economical, designed to disable quickly and move on to the next threat. She didn't waste energy. She didn't hesitate. Her face was calm, almost serene, a chilling contrast to the chaos she was creating. The remaining Vipers finally reacted, pulling out their weapons, but they were clumsy, surprised, their training non-existent compared to whatever instinct drove Eleanor. She dropped the broom, no longer needed as they gave her space. One man raised a handgun. Eleanor was already moving, a low, fast charge across the porch. She ducked under his wild shot, grabbed his wrist, and twisted with bone-breaking force. He screamed as the gun clattered away. A knee came up sharply into his groin, doubling him over and leaving him gasping on the planks. She spun, facing the others. Her stance was low, balanced, her hands open, ready. She didn't look like an old woman anymore. She looked like a predator. The remaining Vipers exchanged wide-eyed glances. Their leader was unconscious on the ground. Several of their number were moaning in pain. The quiet old lady had just taken out half their crew in under a minute, without even raising her voice or breaking a sweat. Fear, real fear this time, replaced their bluster. "Get him," one of them yelled, pointing at the unconscious Spike. They scrambled to drag their fallen leader and injured comrades towards their cars, abandoning their arrogant posture for panicked retreat. Eleanor watched them go, her eyes narrowed. She didn't pursue. She stood on the porch, the silence rushing back in, broken only by the whimpering of the retreating Vipers and the pounding heart of the customer in the pickup truck. The trash bag remained on the porch, a symbol of their arrogance and a testament to their sudden, brutal comeuppance. The Vipers scrambled into their cars and sped away, tires still squealing, leaving the sounds of their engines fading into the distance. They left behind a stunned silence and the unconscious form of their leader, Spike, whom they had hastily dragged into the back seat of the last car. Eleanor watched the dust cloud recede down the highway. She wasn't breathing hard. Her hands weren't shaking. The calm she projected was absolute. But beneath the calm, a cold certainty settled in her gut. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Humiliating Spike and his crew in front of a civilian witness, and in front of each other, was not something they would let stand. Their retreat wasn't a surrender, it was a tactical withdrawal born of shock and pain. They would be back. And they would be angrier, and likely more numerous. The customer in the pickup truck, a middle-aged man named Bob, finally dared to lower his window. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. "Miss Vance." "What? What was that?" he stammered. Eleanor walked over to the edge of the porch, retrieved the discarded fast food bag with the toe of her boot, and picked it up. "Just tidying up, Bob," she said, her voice back to its normal, quiet tone. She walked back into the store to deposit the trash. Bob watched her go, still reeling. He had seen an old woman move like lightning, like someone from a movie, someone not to be trifled with. He had seen the Vipers, the bullies who had been terrorizing their town, flee in terror from her. His fear of the gang was still there, but now, a new, different kind of respect was blooming in his chest. He started pumping his gas, glancing nervously down the road, but also stealing looks at the small store that now seemed less run down and more like a fortress. Inside, Eleanor leaned against the counter, her eyes closed for just a moment. The adrenaline, though controlled, was still a low thrum in her veins. She had been so careful, so deliberate, for so long. Now, in a single, unavoidable moment, she had revealed the truth of her capabilities. The mask was off. The quiet life was over. She had chosen this path decades ago, chosen to step away, to seek peace. But peace wasn't something you could hoard when others sought to destroy it. You had to defend it. She opened her eyes. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the sudden quiet. The peaceful rhythm of Harmony Creek was broken, perhaps irrevocably. Spike's bruised jaw would heal, but his wounded pride would fester. His men would talk, spreading the humiliating tale of the old woman who put them in their place. That kind of story couldn't be tolerated by a gang that relied on fear and intimidation. They would have to respond, and they would respond hard. Eleanor knew this. She hadn't wanted this fight, but it had come to her doorstep, literally. And now that it was here, she wouldn't back down. She began to think, not about patching up her porch, but about defenses, about strategy, about who she could trust in a town that seemed cowed into submission. She needed information. She needed allies. The quiet life had ended with the squeal of tires and the splat of a discarded trash bag. The warrior Eleanor Vance had tried to bury was waking up. Eleanor knew the first step was to understand the scale of the problem. The Vipers were more than just thugs demanding protection money. Their sudden influx of cars, their boldness, hinted at something larger, something funding them or pulling their strings. She couldn't confront an unknown enemy. Information was paramount. Her quiet life had taught her patience and observation, skills honed to a razor's edge in a different context. She spent the next day observing the town, not just from her store, but taking her old, beat-up sedan for drives along the back roads, watching side streets, noticing patterns. She saw Vipers clustered in places they hadn't been before, an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, a derelict farm property down by the river. She also saw subtle signs of their operation. Vehicles with out-of-state plates making quick stops. Packages being transferred in back alleys. Her instincts, dormant for years, were screaming at her. This wasn't just local hooligans. This was something organized, something connected. She needed deeper intel, the kind that came from within or from connections outside the immediate area. Her contacts were old, scattered across the country, many of them retired like her, seeking their own peace. But some remained active, in different capacities. She went back to her small, tidy house behind the store. In the back of a closet, hidden beneath old blankets, was a satellite phone, unused for years but maintained with meticulous care. It was encrypted, untraceable to civilian networks. She powered it on, the familiar hum a stark contrast to the quiet of her home. She dialed a number she hadn't called in over a decade. It rang twice, then connected with a click. "Yeah," a gruff voice answered. "Brick, it's Ellie." A beat of silence, then the voice softened, surprise replacing the gruffness. "Ellie? Well, I'll be damned. Haven't heard from you since." Things are stirring here, Brick," Eleanor said, getting straight to the point. "Got a little pest problem. Local gang, calling themselves the Vipers. Started small, now looks like they're pushing product, maybe more. They got handsy today. Showed them the door. They'll be back, hard." Marcus "Brick" Riley was a name that carried weight in certain circles. A former team leader, now running a veterans motorcycle club that was more than just weekend rides. They looked out for their own, and sometimes, they looked out for others who couldn't. "Pests, huh?" Brick's voice was thoughtful now. "You asking for pest control, Ellie?" "I'm asking what you know about a group using a Viper symbol. Operating. Maybe a state over, maybe two. Connections?" "Hold on," Brick said. There was a pause, the sound of typing in the background. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, Brick came back. "Yeah, heard rumblings," he said. "Small outfit, but they caught the eye of some bigger players. Looked like they were being tested, maybe. Getting plugged into a supply line. Moving product through rural routes. Smart, avoids the usual hot spots. Didn't have a location, though. Harmony Creek, Eleanor supplied. Looks like they've dug in here." "Harmony Creek," Brick repeated, letting the name hang in the air. "Ellie, if they're tied into who I think they might be, they're not just punk kids anymore. This could get messy." It's already messy, Brick, Eleanor said. They threw trash at my feet. Silence again, then a low chuckle from Brick. Okay, yeah, that'll do it. Takes a lot to get you riled, but disrespect has always been a shortcut. They're hurting the town, Brick. Running good people out. Say no more, Brick said. Where is this Harmony Creek? Finding allies wasn't just about finding muscle, it was about finding people who believed in standing up, who had something to fight for, or who possessed skills that complemented hers. Ben Carter, the mechanic whose truck had been at the pump during the incident, was the first. He came by the next day, ostensibly for a coffee, but his eyes kept darting around, his hands fidgeting. He was young, maybe late 20s, but with a seriousness that seemed beyond his years. He'd seen the whole thing. Ms. Vance, he started, clearing his throat. About yesterday. I've never seen anything like that. Eleanor nodded, pouring him a coffee. Just defending my property, Ben. Defending Harmony Creek, looks like to me, Ben said, finding his voice. They've been leaning on everyone. My garage. They spray-painted it last week. Demanded I fix their cars for free. He looked down at his hands. I just paid them. What else could I do? Eleanor slid the coffee across the counter. What you can do, Ben, is decide enough is enough. Ben looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. You think we can actually stop them? They're everywhere. And I heard Spike's older brother is coming. He's supposed to be worse. Spike's brother, huh? Eleanor filed the information away. Escalation. Doesn't matter who comes, Ben. They're just men. And men can be stopped. Are you in, Ben? Are you ready to stand up? Ben looked from Eleanor to the street outside, where a Viper car cruised slowly by. He thought of his garage, his future in this town, the fear in the eyes of his younger sister. Yeah, he said, his voice firming. Yeah, I'm in, Ms. Vance. What do you need? Ben knew the town like the back of his hand, the shortcuts, the abandoned buildings, the drainage systems. He was also a skilled mechanic, valuable for mobility and potential traps. His military background was Army Reserves, not Special Forces, but he knew basic tactics and was good under pressure. Another potential ally was Deputy Miller. Eleanor knew him to be one of the few honest ones on the small sheriff's force. But he was young, cautious, and bound by procedure in a situation where the enemy had no such constraints. She visited him at the small office, ostensibly to report vandalism. Deputy Miller listened patiently, taking notes, but his frustration was evident. Ms. Vance, I hear you, he said, leaning back in his chair. We get calls about the Vipers every day. Harassment, property damage. It's hard to make charges stick. Witnesses are scared, evidence is thin. And frankly, he lowered his voice, glancing towards the sheriff's closed door, Sheriff Brody. He doesn't want to rock the boat too much. Says we need to focus on real crime. Eleanor met his gaze, her eyes sharp. This is real crime, Deputy. It's extortion, intimidation, assault. And it's escalating. I knocked a few of them around yesterday. They won't forget that. They'll retaliate, and it won't just be against me. Deputy Miller paled slightly. He'd heard the whispers, seen the scared looks on his colleagues' faces when the Vipers were mentioned. He believed Eleanor. He'd seen the faint bruises on the few Vipers who'd shown up at the station to complain, bruises they wouldn't explain how they got. He hadn't connected it to Eleanor Vance until now. We're outgunned, Ms. Vance, Miller admitted, rubbing his temples. And I think Brody might even be taking payoffs. Eleanor leaned forward. You can't fight them head-on through official channels right now, Deputy. But you have information. Arrest records, known associates, schedules, patrol routes. Things that could be useful to someone acting. Unofficially. Miller looked up, startled. Ms. Vance, I can't just hand over police information. No, Eleanor agreed calmly. But you could leave reports accidentally where someone might find them. You could take longer on patrol routes where they aren't, leaving areas where they are open. You could notice things and mention them hypothetically. You're a good man, Deputy Miller. Do you want to see this town saved, or choked to death by thugs? Miller swallowed hard, looking at the resolute face of the elderly woman who had just subtly recruited him into an off-the-books operation. He thought of his oath, of the people he was supposed to protect. He thought of the sheriff's greasy smile and the fear in the town. Okay, Ms. Vance, he said softly. What do you need? The Viper's retaliation came swiftly and violently, confirming Eleanor's predictions. Enraged by their humiliation and bolstered by reinforcements, Spike's older brother, a brutal man named Diesel, and a contingent of larger, more professional-looking thugs, they descended on Harmony Creek with renewed ferocity. They firebombed Ben Carter's garage, destroying years of work and Ben's primary source of income. They trashed the local diner, a beloved community gathering spot, beating the owner when he tried to resist. They cruised the streets openly, smashing mailboxes, spray-painting walls, firing handguns into the air. Their message was clear: stand up to us, and we will burn your world down. Fear intensified. People locked themselves in their homes. Sheriff Brody issued a meek statement about increased patrols, but Deputy Miller reported that the sheriff was actively pulling resources away from Viper hotspots. The town felt like it was under siege. This escalation served to solidify Eleanor's resolve and galvanize her burgeoning network of allies. Ben Carter, standing amidst the smoldering ruins of his garage, his face streaked with soot and tears, was now utterly committed. Deputy Miller, witnessing the blatant disregard for law and order, felt his professional ethics overridden by a desperate need for justice. And Brick Riley called back. Ellie, saw the news feeds. Looks like your pest problem just got upgraded to an infestation. The vipers you ran off. They're tied to the iron serpents. Serious players, cartel adjacent. Spike's brother, Diesel, he's worse than Spike ever was. Used to run muscle for the serpents. They're not just moving product through your town, Ellie. Looks like they're setting up a distribution hub there. Harmony Creek is about to become serpent territory. This was worse than Eleanor had anticipated. An actual cartel presence meant more resources, more violence, more entrenched corruption. It meant the Vipers were just the tip of a much larger, deadlier iceberg. Serpents, Eleanor repeated, the name cold on her tongue. Figures. They overplayed their hand with me, though. Got the big boys' attention faster than they meant to. Yeah, well, the big boys are sending in heavy hitters, Brick said. You still want help? Eleanor looked out the window of her quiet store at the fear-filled streets. She thought of Ben's ruined garage, the beaten diner owner, the terror in Bob the customer's eyes. She thought of the peace she had sought, now utterly shattered. Brick, she said, her voice hard. Send the club. Tell them to come quiet, in small groups, look like tourists or truckers passing through. Have them meet me off the highway, the old quarry road, 2 nights from now. We're going to need everyone. Brick's voice was grim. Copy that, Ellie. Tell them to be ready for anything. The serpents don't play nice. Neither do I, Brick. Not anymore. The old quarry road was deserted, overgrown, a forgotten scar on the landscape. Under a sliver of moon, the silence was broken only by the chirping of crickets and the distant rumble of highway traffic. One by one, motorcycles, vans, and unmarked cars pulled up, parking discreetly in the dense brush. Roughly 20 people gathered, a mix of hardened faces, quiet professionals, and a few nervous civilians. This was Eleanor's army. Brick Riley, a bear of a man with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen too much, was there, along with a dozen members of his motorcycle club, veterans from various branches and units, each with a unique set of skills. Ben Carter stood beside Eleanor, his jaw set, still smelling faintly of smoke from his garage fire. Deputy Miller arrived in his personal truck, out of uniform, his face etched with worry and determination. Eleanor stood before them, not on a podium, but simply in the clearing, the faint moonlight illuminating her face. She didn't look imposing, just like a small, elderly woman. But when she spoke, every eye was on her, every ear strained to hear. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice low but carrying absolute authority. "You all know what's happening in Harmony Creek. Fear. Extortion. Violence. What started as a local gang problem is now something much worse. They call themselves the Vipers, but they're backed by the Iron Serpents, a criminal organization moving drugs and possibly more through our town. They came to my store the other day. They disrespected me. They hurt Ben. They attacked this town." She paused, her gaze sweeping over their faces. "We could leave. We could give up. Let them have it. Move on. But this is our home," she said, her voice hardening slightly. "Or it's a home for people who deserve peace. These people, these serpents and vipers, they don't earn respect. They demand it through fear. They prey on the weak. That stops now." She unfolded a large, hand-drawn map of Harmony Creek, laying it flat on the hood of Ben's truck. A tactical light provided focused illumination. Suddenly, the unassuming old woman transformed into a commanding officer briefing her team. "Here's what we know," she said, pointing with a stick. "Deputy Miller has confirmed their main operations centers are the abandoned warehouse off Route 7, and the old Miller farm by the river. Ben tells me the farm has an old tunnel system, likely used for smuggling back in Prohibition. They might be using it now. Brick's contacts confirm drug shipments are due in within 48 hours, likely dropped at one of these locations." Her finger moved across the map. "Their strength is their numbers and their brutality. Their weakness is their arrogance and lack of discipline, especially the local Vipers. Diesel is dangerous, but predictable. He relies on overwhelming force." She looked up. "We won't meet force head-on. We use theirs against them. We hit them where they're vulnerable, disrupt their operation, and draw them out. We cut the head off the snake." Eleanor outlined the plan, concise and logical. Phase 1, Recon and Disruption. Small teams, led by Brick's veterans, would gather more precise intelligence on patrols, security, and schedules at the warehouse and farm. Simultaneously, they would execute small, non-lethal disruptions, disabling vehicles, cutting communications, creating diversions, enough to make the serpents uneasy but not reveal the full extent of the threat. Phase 2, Pressure. Using the gathered intel, they would apply targeted pressure, intercepting small drug movements, hitting stash houses in neighboring towns the serpents relied on, making it clear their operation was compromised. Phase 3, the Lure and Confrontation. Force Diesel and the main body of Vipers/Serpents to converge on a location of their choosing, a location where they would have the tactical advantage. She pointed to a section of the map near her own property, a cluster of old industrial buildings and dense woods. "We make my store, maybe Ben's place, look like the primary target again. We make them think we're weak, cornered. Diesel's pride, his need to crush resistance where it started, will draw him here." "That's dangerous, Ms. Vance," Ben said, his brow furrowed. "You'd be the bait." "I'm the target anyway, Ben," Eleanor replied calmly. "Better to be a target on my terms, in a place I know intimately. This old gas station, these woods. I know every inch. My guys are good," Ellie, Brick added, "but the serpents. They use military-grade stuff sometimes. Body armor, serious firepower. We'll use their overconfidence against them," Eleanor said. "They think they're facing scared civilians and maybe a few aging bikers. They won't be expecting us." She looked at Brick's crew, at Ben, at Deputy Miller. "We are fighting for this town. For the idea that people can live without fear. That bullies don't always win. This isn't just about taking down a gang. This is about sending a message that Harmony Creek is not open for business to parasites. Her eyes, usually kind, held a fire that had been banked for years. Are you with me? A chorus of determined, yes, we are, and nods answered her. Deputy Miller spoke up, hesitantly. Ms. Vance, I still can't officially be a part of this. But that intel, I can keep providing it. And if things go loud, if there's undeniable evidence, maybe I can mobilize something. Clean players from neighboring jurisdictions, maybe. That's all I ask, Deputy, Eleanor said, giving him a brief, genuine smile. Do what you can, within your bounds. We'll handle the rest. The air grew heavy with the weight of their shared commitment. They dispersed as quietly as they had arrived, leaving Eleanor, Ben, and Brick for a final, detailed strategy session. The plan was set. The stakes were clear. Harmony Creek's fate rested on their ability to execute against a dangerous, well-connected enemy. And the enemy was about to reveal its true, terrifying scale. Speaking of stories and showing strength in the face of overwhelming odds, telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. If you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. And tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. The serpents didn't disappoint in their escalation. Brick's intel was spot on. The drug shipment arrived, larger than expected, confirming the scale of their operation. Diesel established command at the old farm, bringing in more muscle, more vehicles, and heavier weapons. Deputy Miller, managing to skirt Sheriff Brody's direct orders and utilize his access to information before it was fully filtered, passed along details, patrol rotations, estimated numbers at each location, even potential supply routes the serpents were using. He risked his career, maybe his life, but the sight of the town suffering, the victims of the Viper's brutality, had solidified his moral resolve. They're treating Harmony Creek like their personal property, Ms. Vance, he'd reported in a hushed phone call from a burner phone Eleanor provided. Spike's brother, Diesel, he's got a reputation. Used to be military, dishonorably discharged, then went straight into enforcement for the serpents. He's smart, cruel, and hates being crossed. Especially by women, I hear. Eleanor had simply absorbed the information, her plan already adjusting for Diesel's specific traits. An arrogant, misogynistic former soldier was a dangerous opponent, but predictable in different ways than a street thug. His weakness would be underestimating anyone who wasn't a man, and anyone who didn't fit his narrow view of capability. Meanwhile, Phase 1 of Eleanor's plan began. Under the cover of darkness, Brick's veterans, moving with the stealth and efficiency only years of specialized training could provide, began their work. Small teams scouted the warehouse and the farm. They noted entry points, camera placements, guard rotations, even the makes and models of the vehicles present. Other teams executed the disruptions. Tires were silently deflated on parked cars at secondary Viper hangouts. Fuel lines were subtly crimped. Communication cables near the warehouse were snipped in key locations. Nothing overtly hostile, just enough to cause delays, confusion, and a growing sense of unease among the serpents. They're getting jumpy, Brick reported to Eleanor via the secure channel. Seeing ghosts. Diesel's barking orders, can't figure out why things are going wrong. Blaming the local Vipers mostly. Good. Let them eat each other. Phase 2 commenced, increasing the pressure. Deputy Miller's intel on potential supply routes proved invaluable. A small team intercepted a courier vehicle miles outside of town, using non-lethal takedown methods and leaving the driver tied up with a cryptic note about disrespecting the community. A secondary stash house the serpents were using in a nearby county, identified through Brick's network and Miller's less-than-official searches of arrest records, was reported anonymously to a clean federal task force unit, leading to a bust that wouldn't be traced back to Harmony Creek. These weren't direct attacks on the serpents' main forces in town, but they were blows to their operation, hitting their infrastructure and flow of illicit goods. Diesel was becoming visibly agitated. His patrols became more frequent, more aggressive. His men started hassling anyone they saw near their locations, roughing up innocent people purely out of frustration. The tension in Harmony Creek was electric, a constant, humming dread. But amidst the fear, something else was stirring. The community, battered and frightened, had seen the serpent's brutal response. They had also seen the quiet, unexpected resistance. Rumors spread about the old gas station owner who put Spike in his place. Whispers circulated about small, unexplained incidents happening to Viper cars or supplies. People started leaving small gestures of support at Eleanor's store, baked goods, a thermos of coffee left on the porch early in the morning, a quiet nod of solidarity. Ben Carter, despite the destruction of his garage, was often seen helping neighbors, organizing small cleanup efforts, his face grim but determined. Deputy Miller, while officially bound, seemed to be everywhere except where the worst of the serpent activity was, his presence a quiet reassurance in other parts of town. The serpent's cruelty hadn't just instilled fear, it had sparked a quiet defiance. They had underestimated the resilience of a community pushed too far. The pressure mounted, the disruptions escalated, and Diesel's frustration boiled over. His supply lines were getting hit, his men were jumpy, and he still hadn't found the source of the problems. His instincts screamed that the core of the resistance was the old woman who had dared to defy his brother. He decided it was time to crush the problem at its root, to make an example that no one in Harmony Creek would ever forget. Deputy Miller, using a prearranged signal, managed to relay fragmented but crucial intelligence. Diesel was consolidating his forces, planning a major strike. The target seemed to be Eleanor's gas station and the surrounding area, including the old industrial buildings and woods nearby. It was exactly what Eleanor had planned for. She activated Phase 3. Eleanor, Ben, and Brick refined the final details. The trap was simple, leveraging the terrain and the enemy's predictable attack vector. The old industrial buildings provided cover and multiple firing angles. The dense woods offered concealment for flanking maneuvers. The open area around the gas station would be the kill zone. Eleanor's store itself would be the bait. They moved the remaining valuable supplies out, reinforced the doors and windows of the store building itself as a temporary fallback point, and rigged several non-lethal surprises around the property, tripwires, noisemakers, directional lights designed to disorient. Brick's men secured key positions in the buildings and tree lines. Ben and a couple of his friends who had quietly joined the cause rigged a large diesel truck at the edge of the property, ready to block the main road if needed. Deputy Miller provided the estimated time of the strike, late afternoon, just before dusk, when visibility would be tricky. Eleanor stood on her porch, looking out at the quiet street, now eerily empty. The air was heavy with anticipation. She felt no fear, only a deep, settling calm. This was it. The final confrontation. She adjusted the worn leather gloves she wore, the kind mechanics or farmers might use, but on her hands, they looked like combat gear. Inside the store, her defenses were simple, mundane items, heavy rolling pins, sturdy brooms, cans of beans that could be thrown with surprising force and accuracy. And hidden beneath the counter, a very different kind of tool, a compact, well-maintained pistol, loaded and ready. A relic from a different life, kept clean and accessible out of habit. She heard the distant rumble first, a low growl that rapidly grew into a roar of multiple engines. The ground began to vibrate faintly. Moments later, a helicopter appeared on the horizon, flying low, followed by a convoy of vehicles tearing down the highway towards Harmony Creek. The Vipers and the Iron Serpents were coming, bringing the full weight of their power to bear. And they were walking straight into Eleanor Vance's trap. The lead vehicles, a mix of SUVs and pickup trucks, screeched to a halt at the edge of Eleanor's property. The helicopter hovered overhead, its rotor wash kicking up dust, a symbol of their intended dominance. Diesel, a burly man with a scarred face and cold eyes, stepped out of the first SUV. Spike, his jaw still slightly swollen, was beside him, looking vengeful. About 30 armed men fanned out, many in tactical gear, a clear upgrade from the local Vipers. They moved with a brutal efficiency, surrounding the gas station. This wasn't intimidation, this was annihilation. Diesel raised a bullhorn. Eleanor Vance, his voice boomed, distorted by the speaker and the helicopter's noise. You made a mistake, old woman. You thought you could defy us? Look around. This is the Iron Serpents. You are finished. Come out now, and maybe we'll be quick. Silence. The porch swing creaked in the helicopter's wind. Spike snickered. She's probably hiding under her bed, Diesel. Diesel grinned, a nasty, humorless expression. Send a team to drag her out. Burn this place to the ground. 4 men advanced towards the store. As the first one stepped onto the porch, a tripwire caught his ankle. It wasn't rigged to an explosive, but to a series of cans filled with rocks, strung up just inside the door frame. They clattered down with a tremendous noise, amplified by the helicopter's roar. The men froze, startled. Then, from the surrounding buildings and tree lines, a barrage of non-lethal projectiles rained down, paintballs, hardened clay pellets, things that stung and disoriented but didn't kill. Sniper rifles weren't needed, veteran marksmen used high-powered airsoft rifles and slingshots with incredible accuracy, targeting faces, hands, weapon sights. Confusion erupted. The Serpents weren't expecting fire from multiple directions. They ducked for cover, unsure where the real threat was. Diesel roared orders, trying to regain control. It's a trap. Flank them. Heavy fire on the buildings. His men opened fire, spraying bullets indiscriminately at the surrounding structures. This was exactly what Eleanor wanted. Their positions were revealed. From the woods to the west, a squad of Bricks men emerged, moving fast and low. They weren't using firearms yet, relying on surprise and melee weapons, batons, knives, even modified tire irons. They hit the Serpent's flank with brutal efficiency, taking down several men before the main group could react. Ben and his small team, positioned behind the old industrial building to the east, used the distraction to maneuver, aiming to cut off the Serpent's retreat to their vehicles. The battle was joined, not as a straight-up firefight, but a tactical dismantling orchestrated by Eleanor. While her allies engaged the main force, Eleanor herself remained at the store, the primary bait, but also the hidden force ready to strike at the heart. Diesel, seeing his flank crumble, bellowed in rage. He finally understood he wasn't dealing with scared civilians. Find the old woman, he screamed at Spike. She's behind this. Bring her to me. Spike, eager to redeem himself, gathered a few men and advanced towards the store, weapons raised. As they reached the porch, Eleanor appeared in the doorway. She held nothing in her hands. Looking for me? She asked, her voice calm, almost conversational, cutting through the din of the fight happening around them. Spike hesitated, the memory of her swift, brutal efficiency making him wary. Diesel, seeing his brother pause, roared, "Don't be a fool, Spike. Just shoot her." Spike raised his handgun, but before he could fire, Eleanor moved. It was a blur of motion, the kind of movement honed by years of lethal practice. She didn't dodge the bullet, she seemed to shift past it, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Her right hand swept up, not to grab the gun, but Spike's wrist holding it. A sharp, economical twist, and Spike cried out as the bones in his wrist snapped. The gun fell. Her left hand delivered a palm heel strike under his chin, replicating the broom handle blow from before, but with bone and muscle. Spike went down instantly, unconscious again. His men, shocked by the speed and brutality, raised their weapons, but Eleanor was already on the move, retreating back into the store, drawing them inside, where the narrow confines and her knowledge of the layout gave her an advantage. The Serpents poured into the small store, confident they had her cornered. They were met with darkness and silence. Eleanor was moving through the back rooms, a ghost in her own building. Using her intimate knowledge of the layout, she moved from shadow to shadow, hitting them from unexpected angles. One man rounded a corner and met a flying can of beans to the face, staggering back, disoriented. Another felt a sudden, sharp pain in his knee as Eleanor, unseen, delivered a crippling kick. She used the environment, shelves became obstacles, the counter a barrier, the limited visibility her ally. She wasn't fighting fair, she was fighting smart. And she was winning. Men stumbled out of the store, injured and confused, reporting that the old woman was, like a ninja, or, moving like smoke. Diesel watched, enraged, as his men were being systematically taken apart by an enemy he couldn't see, led by an old woman he had utterly underestimated. The fight raged around the property. Brick's veterans fought with precision, isolating serpent fighters, using cover effectively, disabling rather than killing where possible, but lethal force was used when necessary against the more ruthless opponents. Ben and his group managed to disable several serpent vehicles, trapping others. The helicopter overhead, a symbol of serpent power, suddenly banked sharply. A well-aimed shot from Brick's best marksman, using a high-powered rifle with a specialized, non-lethal round designed to disable electronics, had hit a critical component, forcing the pilot to make an emergency landing miles away. The loss of air support was a major blow to the Serpent's morale and command. Diesel, seeing his forces crumbling, his men routed from the store, his escape potentially cut off, made a crucial error. He abandoned his command position and stormed towards the gas station, intent on taking down Eleanor himself. "Vance," he bellowed, "I'll kill you myself." Eleanor emerged from the store, stepping onto the porch, no longer hiding. She held the compact pistol steady in her hand, aimed not at Diesel, but at the ground near his feet. "It's over, Diesel," she said, her voice amplified slightly in the relative quiet that had fallen over her immediate vicinity. "You're done here. Your men are broken. Your operation is finished." Diesel snarled, raising his assault rifle. "You think that little toy stops me?" He charged, firing wildly. Eleanor didn't flinch. She waited, letting him commit. Then, with breathtaking speed, she didn't fire at him. She fired past him, 2 shots in quick succession, hitting something unseen behind him. A secondary fuel tank, hidden behind some brush near the highway, erupted in a controlled burst of flame and smoke, a pre-planned distraction and signal. Simultaneously, Ben's rigged truck roared to life and was driven across the main road, effectively blocking it. Serpent vehicles trying to escape found their path cut off. Caught between the trap and the Allies converging on his position, Diesel hesitated for a fatal second. That was all Eleanor needed. Her pistol came up, aimed now directly at him. She didn't fire to kill. She fired to disable. A shot to the shoulder, another to the thigh. Clean, precise hits that dropped him instantly, screaming in pain and disbelief. His rifle clattered away. The remaining serpents, seeing their leader fall, surrounded, trapped, and defeated by an old woman, threw down their weapons. The fight was over. The silence that followed the chaotic battle was profound, broken only by the moans of the injured and the distant wail of sirens. Deputy Miller, having used the disruption and subsequent visible chaos, like the burning fuel tank and blocked road, as undeniable evidence, had managed to contact and mobilize clean law enforcement from a neighboring county, bypassing Sheriff Brody. They arrived in force, securing the area, taking the surrendered serpents and vipers into custody. Spike and Diesel were among the captured. Their reign of terror ended not by overwhelming force, but by cunning and unexpected resistance. Eleanor stood on her porch, the pistol now hanging loosely in her hand, the adrenaline beginning to recede. Brick and his men emerged from the shadows, faces grim but victorious. Ben ran up, breathless. "Ms. Vance. Everyone okay?" Eleanor nodded, tucking the pistol away. "We're all right, Ben. Everyone accounted for. Few bumps and bruises on our side," Brick reported. "They took some lumps, though." Couple of broken bones, concussions. Nobody serious on our end. Couple of theirs won't walk straight for a while. He looked at the scene, the captured criminals, the arriving police, the quiet, resolute figure of Eleanor Vance. "Well, Ellie," he said, a note of awe in his voice. "You certainly tidied up." Eleanor managed a faint smile. Deputy Miller approached, his uniform crisp, his face tired but relieved. "Ms. Vance," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you. You saved us." Eleanor shook his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "You did your part too, Deputy. Made sure justice could be done, officially." He glanced towards the arriving Sheriff Brody, who looked utterly bewildered and furious at the scene. "Yeah," Miller said, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. "Looks like Sheriff Brody's got some explaining to do." The Serpent and Viper prisoners were loaded into police vans. The helicopter crew, who had crash-landed nearby and were quickly apprehended by another team of Miller's backups, were also secured. The physical mess of the battle remained, spent casings, discarded weapons, signs of the struggle, but the suffocating fear that had gripped Harmony Creek was lifting. Later, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the quiet battlefield, Eleanor sat on her porch swing with Ben and Brick. The townspeople, slowly emerging from their homes, began tentative cleanup efforts, no longer afraid to be seen outside. Ben's garage was ruined, the diner still trashed, but there was a different air now, a sense of shared purpose, of having faced the darkness and pushed it back. "Why, Miss Vance?" Ben asked, looking at her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Why did you? What was all this? How did you know how to do any of that?" Eleanor looked out at the road, at the town she had chosen for its quiet anonymity. "I had a different life, Ben," she said softly. "Before Harmony Creek. A life where you learned to be very good at very bad things, so bad things wouldn't happen to good people." She didn't elaborate, and they didn't press. Her past remained her own, but its impact was undeniable. "These people," she continued, referring to the defeated Vipers and Serpents. "They thought power was about taking, about making others afraid. They thought respect was something you demanded with threats and violence." She shook her head. "True power, true respect. It's earned. It's about standing up, not just for yourself, but for others. It's about community. They threw trash at my feet because they thought I was old and weak, disposable. They thought Harmony Creek was disposable." She looked at Ben, at Brick, at the townspeople helping each other. "They learned they were wrong. That this town, these people. We have strength they couldn't even imagine." "Took you long enough to get back in the game, Ellie," Brick said with a wry smile. "Hoped I wouldn't have to," Eleanor replied. "Peace is better. But some things are worth fighting for." The moral lesson hung in the air, simple but profound. Respect isn't given, it's earned through action, through courage, through standing for what is right. Bullies, no matter how strong they seem, can be defeated when good people refuse to be intimidated and stand together. In the months that followed, Harmony Creek began to heal. With Sheriff Brody implicated in the Serpent's activities and subsequently arrested, Deputy Miller, now acting sheriff, led a thorough cleanup of the local force. Honest officers were brought in, and the fear of law enforcement corruption dissipated. Ben Carter's garage was rebuilt, better and stronger, with help from Brick's crew and the grateful townspeople. The diner reopened, packed with customers supporting the owner. The Vipers and Iron Serpents involved in the Harmony Creek operation faced justice, their network dismantled, their leaders imprisoned. The national news barely noticed, just another rural drug bust, but for the people of Harmony Creek, it was everything. The town found a new energy, a newfound sense of unity and pride. They had been tested, threatened, but they had stood firm, inspired by the quiet strength of one unassuming woman. Eleanor Vance's gas station and general store didn't change much physically. The paint was still a little faded, the swing still creaked. But its reputation changed entirely. It became a symbol of resistance, a reminder that even the quietest places hold hidden strength. People stopped just driving through. They stopped, not just for gas or coffee, but to offer a word of thanks, a nod of respect to the woman who had saved their town. They saw the elderly woman behind the counter, her hands steady, her eyes kind, and they knew her story. Eleanor Vance found her peace again in Harmony Creek, but it was a different kind of peace now. It wasn't the peace of anonymity, but the peace of purpose fulfilled, of justice delivered, of a community saved. Her quiet life had been disrupted, her hidden past revealed. But in doing so, she hadn't just saved the town, she had reminded everyone, including herself, that true strength isn't about the power you wield, but the will you possess to protect those who need it most. And sometimes, that strength arrives not with a roar, but with the quiet click of a well-maintained weapon, and the unwavering resolve in the eyes of an old woman who has simply had enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.